So we write great content. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen the total amount of traffic to our websites decline as people are finding those answers in LLMs. But it also feels like, and we see this borne out in the data, that the trust and the good content that we build up on those sites are fueling those citations. So we feel like we've been doing listicle style content for a while, but we think we're getting disproportionate credit in LLMs because we've done all of those other things.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association, also run an agency Did It. I have a brand that I use to run experiments in Truth Nutrition and run a bunch of other things as well. Common theme is marketing, which is why I'm super excited to be chatting with John Busby, who's the CMO of Centerfield. So we'll start off with a question just about in this crazy market we're in, how is marketing and advertising changing for you as a B2B marketer yourself, right? Because you're finding customers and clients, but also for your B2B clients.
Thanks, Kevin, for having me on the pod. Really excited to talk to you today. I think the number one topic on my mind and the mind of our clients right now is AI visibility, LLM visibility, and how to navigate zero-click search. Um, so one of the things we do at Centerfield is operate comparison websites. So in the B2B market, we have business.com. In the auto insurance market, we have autoinsurance.com. And consumers or business decision makers come to those sites to research products and services. Um, I have never we've never received so much inbound email saying, can we work with you to produce content on these sites? And we know in talking to many people that are reaching out to us, the motivation is trying to understand how to have their brands more visible as LLM answers. So that's the number one thing that I'm seeing that's changing, top of mind for sure.
Yeah, that is an interesting category at the moment, particularly for publishers who have branded content divisions and editorial content mixed together. Because we've seen, at least for the time being, listicles are incredibly heavily used by some of the LLM algorithms, right? And so top 10 lists, 20 lists, et cetera, those are all ingested by the LLMs. So, have
Yeah.
you guys changed your modality of content as a result of understanding how both SEO is evolving and how the LLMs are evolving?
Well, for a long time on our websites, we've been focused on a topic I'm sure your audience is very familiar with EAT, EEAT, and making sure that all of the content on your site has expertise, authority, trust. And when we review a piece of software or an actual physical product, we're showing people that it's actually humans doing the reviews, using the product. So we write great content. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen the total amount of traffic to our websites decline as people are finding those answers in LLMs. But it also feels like, and we see this borne out in the data, that the trust and the good content that we build up on those sites are fueling those citations. So we feel like we've been doing listicle style content for a while, but we think we're getting disproportionate credit in LLMs because we've done all of those other things. Now, I
Hmm.
think the question is, and Kevin, I'd be interested to know your take on this, is, why would business.com be so good in citations? Do LLMs inherently know that we have these attributes, that we have great writers or whatever, or are they piggybacking off of how Google ranks those sites as a proxy for guessing what the trust should be? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But my opinion is actually both,
Okay.
because if you sort of watch, and each of the models is a little bit different, but a lot of them have, and you can actually see them in many cases where they'll literally do a search, and the search will look unusually Google-like, and
Yeah.
then it will amass information that it finds from a search of its own. So as a result of that, some elements of core SEO, to your earlier point about the fact that you followed all the best practices from an SEO perspective, and so a lot of your content is highly valued within traditional SERP, right? That is an advantage for you guys, right? Because that's going to end up getting ingested and used if a real-time crawl is occurring. But beyond the real-time crawl, as far as the historical information that's also pulled on by the LLMs, that's also being used. What we're curious to see is whether or not the LLM algorithms start to tease out the difference between, it's almost like the return of the author concept, right?
Right.
Because for a very brief period of time, there was this idea that within schema, you could say, oh, this isn't just the New York Times, it's a specific author, or this isn't just the Wall Street Journal, it's a specific author. And then you could attribute different levels of quality to different authors, right? Not just to the domain. Right. And that sort of went away. It was there for a little while and it sort of went away. But I have a feeling that in the age of AI, where content is being ingested and graded, there may be a little bit of that bubbling back up, right, within all the algorithms, where it doesn't just matter about the domain. It's who was the actual author, right? And so we'll see whether that happens or not. So that's something we can both watch together. But from the perspective of that being important to your clients, right? Clients who are realizing, okay, it may look like business.com doesn't have the same web traffic, but it's authoritative, right? And that authoritative position in the market still justifies that we participate with them in some way. So I do feel like that's where we are at the moment, right? As you guys are, and all your various domains, all of which are, most of which are very well respected from an SEO perspective. That gives you an unusual advantage in the publisher ecosystem that many other publishers don't have.
Yeah, and well, first of all, to go back to your author point, I think it's a really important one because content is so easy to produce now. How
Right.
do you distinguish among the dozens of lists of auto insurance companies? And should you be choosing, an author, that is also seen as an authority of the subject? Is the author quoted by the New York Times? Is the author speak at a conference? Does the author produce their own research about things? These things should be more important to LLMs as they're trying to distinguish between fact and fiction. So really interested to see how that plays out. Another thing that's interesting in this whole thing is is YouTube and video content. I'm sure you feel the same way. Actually, for many years, we invested in a significant amount of review content and thought leadership content in YouTube, and it was actually really hard to figure out what the ROI was for us. Um, but we're finding these things are being used heavily in the LLMs and helping us build authority for our clients. And it was sort of like an unexpected serendipitous moment. And I think that's good. That's good too, because it's rewarding it's rewarding players who have just been trying to write informative good stuff. So I just think in general that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a couple of different ways to view that from the LLM engineer or Google engineer lens, right? Video content tends to be authentic human generated content, right? It's for the time being until the deep fakes get extremely good. This is
Yeah.
actually you and me having a conversation, right?
Yes, it
And
is.
and to the extent that our conversation creates a transcript and that transcript has new information into it, at least it's a little bit more trustworthy than just some textual content that a robot would come across, right? And so you have to imagine that the LLM engineers and the Google engineers are sort of saying, well, this is actually super valuable for the time being. I'm pretty sure these were humans generating this content. And of course, understanding the individual humans maybe even adds an additional layer, right? Because of who we are and our history. So that's going to be really, really, really fascinating to see how that ends up manifesting. Whether Google's going to continue to let the other LLMs crawl the transcripts of
Hmm.
YouTube, for example, remains to be seen. For the time being, it looks like there's still a lot of transcript information in ChatGPT, for example, or in Claude. Google
Seems
may
that way.
decide this is way too valuable for me to let out into the wild. And so, those folks who are heavy content creators in video may want to think about a syndication strategy that makes sure that that content doesn't sit in just one place because there's
Hmm.
risk, right? Because if you think about some of the publishers like Reddit deciding to license out their content and say, no, you can't even crawl it. Like if I find it anywhere in there, like that's bad for you, right? And they're saying this is copyrighted stuff, and they're starting to do deals. And the legal landscape is still a little bit in flux as it relates to how much of it can be used under fair use or not, whatever. So I think it changes from our GEO practice that did it, which is our hottest area, right?
It's got to be. It has to be.
It really changes the strategy because it has SEO as the fundamental layer, but then the content creation and content syndication strategy is changing as a result of where the stuff sits and the likelihood that it gets crawled and then the likelihood that it's considered authoritative and or human, right? That all has implications into the overall visibility strategy on a go forward basis. So it is really it's almost like I'm reliving the early days of SEO because I started in SEO before Google was founded, right? So
Oh,
this
you
is
did?
like, yeah,
Okay.
started in SEO in 1993. So
Okay.
this is fun to do all over again with a completely new set of best practices.
I really feel that way. And also, you'll have to tell me whether this was true with in the early days of SEO, but it feels like they're brand new budget line items. I think when you're in the performance marketing or brand space, there's like a performance budget and a brand budget and those sort of things. This seems like a totally new um, initiative and budget where every board member is telling the CEO, how are you playing in this? And every CEO is telling the CMO, how do you do this? And the CMO is asking their team, and a lot of people are doing test and learn right now. It's very interesting and exciting. So yeah, that to circle back to your very first question, that's absolutely the thing I think
Yeah.
is changing most.
It's interesting because I find that there's two camps, right? There's the camp in which new budget is being released, knowing that they need to future-proof for visibility in LLMs, and do GEO or AIO, whatever you want to call it. And then there's sort of, I think, what is slightly more common, which is the marketing team and CMO wants to be educated on are the things I probably should already be doing
Hmm.
that my competition is doing, that if I did them more, that would also result in higher visibility. And that's where I actually find that it's easier to get the CFOs and the CMOs to sign off on that,
Oh,
right? So you use an
that's probably
example
true.
of your video example, right? So you didn't have ROI use cases, right, for your video that you were creating years back, and that it ends up now having demonstrable ROI,
It
right?
really does. Yeah.
But you could now do an analysis of yourselves and your competitors, as could your current sponsors, and see, oh, well, the folks who are outranking us in LLM results or have higher visibility probabilities, they're generating 3 times more content than we are on video.
Hmm.
They're 6 times more active in Reddit than we are. Their social media that's crawlable, they're double as active, right? Let's say LinkedIn, for example, right? And so those are probably things we should be doing anyway. And then there's the whole digital PR and PR element. Again, what levels of citations are you getting? Are you producing research that's getting you out there? These are probably all things that are underinvested anyway, right? And I find that it's easier to sort of put the punch list together and say, don't just do something exclusively for GEO visibility improvement. Do it because you should be doing it anyway, and it correlates really highly with a lift in visibility, right? Because then if you can at least say to the bean counters, like, okay, I looked at my competition and they were all out investing me in these 3 areas. And we probably should be doing that. Community management, digital PR or PR, right? Video content creation. As to how you do that, well, luckily agencies like you and me, right, can advise, or like groups
No
that
doubt.
know, right, can advise and give best practices.
I
But
totally agree.
let's jump over to the walled gardens, right? Because
Sure.
that's another thing that I think there's sort of a love-hate relationship that marketers have with the walled gardens, and it's the reason you guys exist, right? People are looking for leads and visibility in places outside of Google and Meta, right, and LinkedIn. So they would, of course, they all seem to be changing their platforms where they're using AI as a catalyst to say, listen, just give us your Amex, we'll run everything for you. Like, just trust us. As long as we got that thank you page pixel, our AI will make all the adjustments for you. And so, what do you think marketers should know about the downsides of the black boxes? That why they should be more diversified in their allocation of budgets.
Well, I would say two things. Before I talk about the downside, I actually want to maybe give an upside example, but it requires a lot of work. And even if
Mm,
you talk about let's say Meta as its own garden, um, I think where people go wrong is they optimize for the wrong thing. And you have to
100%.
you have to optimize all the way down to the sale, which for an e-commerce customer is kind of easy. But for like, let's say an insurance policy where you got to wait a few weeks for it to bind, or a business loan where you've got to wait a certain amount of time for it to actually close. And so what a lot of marketers do is they say, well, that's tough to measure. So let me walk it back a few steps and let me optimize towards the lead form, or let me optimize towards something else. I find that cannot work at large scale because
Yeah.
there are too many incentives. I'd say you can't underinvest in a full measurement pipeline to sale, because when you get that right, um, you're going to be in a really good position. So a downside I would say is not focusing on full measurement. There's another potential downside though, which is understanding the scenarios in which your ad, let's say, is seen by a consumer for the purposes of incrementality.
Hmm.
Because if you're dealing with kind of like a last click attribution scenario, sometimes the things that look like they have the most return for you actually have the least value. So that's probably like the biggest downside. People have looked at the coupon market for a long time. So it's like I'm about to check out and I'm going to see if there's a coupon code, and then the coupon provider will get some credit for that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because coupons do provide some level of incrementality, but the amount that you should receive as a marketer should be relatively small as compared to a program which is higher up funnel. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's probably the biggest downside, not understanding incrementality or not full funnel measurement.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. It dovetails into what my next question was going to be about the in the case of B2B and
Yeah,
B2C, long-term value, right?
yeah,
When you can predict within your media buy, who the best customers are going to be, not the average customers, and you can cherry pick out those impressions and those clicks, that becomes game changer, right? Because you're in an auction. And your ability to
yes,
afford the media is directly proportional to you understanding just how valuable that impression or click was in comparison to the other ones that you choosing not to buy. Let your competitors buy the ones that are mediocre, right? And go in there and buy the really great ones. And so I agree with you 100%. It's amazing how many gigantic marketers really don't have their full business intelligence built, right, to truly understand which touch points drove the kinds of valuable customers as opposed to the average customer. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, this is going to be a big challenge for CMOs. Is some of these challenges happen due to your organization and what you're bonused on, or what your target is.
For sure, yeah.
Some folks have to spend a certain amount, and some folks have to get a certain amount of leads, and some folks have to convert the leads to sales.
Mm.
And when the different silos aren't all optimizing towards the lifetime value of the customer, and or the CAC, or whatever, you have these little inefficiencies as different people in your organization are buying different programs. So the ones that work the best, and the programs that work the best are ones where the incentives are aligned. There's one program. This is a B2C program of ours, not a B2B, it's in the home services space. But we're paid for a customer acquisition, but then we pay the money back if that person churns
Mm.
within 90 days, or something like that, which is a huge forcing function for us to make sure that we have lifetime value customers. Also, like the Amazon affiliate program or the Walmart affiliate program, those, if someone returns the product, you as the affiliate marketer, you have to pay back. You have to pay back, or they withdraw it from your account. And so the programs that really understand who is returning, makes a huge difference on whether or not you can scale that program.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's shift a little bit to the common existential crisis that publishers and many brands are having now
Yeah,
with the advent of GEO or of chatbots, basically, in that the interaction of the consumer is not necessarily with a SERP anymore. And there may be zero click value that is created. And we already see a lot of evidence that people, do research and then do a secondary search, right? Which of course, and then they end up clicking on the brand, right? When the brand shows up, because they're combining the brand that they found in an LLM result with a follow-up search, right? Perhaps lower down the funnel.
right.
So, given that there's a lot of opacity in that, right, from the perspective of the marketer, and this could be a marketer at a publisher, it could be a marketer, in any category. If they're seeing this drop in SEO traffic that they've worked so hard to get, what do you recommend that they do?
Well, testing. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. So probably with SEO, which you've done for a long time, we've had a practice within our organization. You change the schema markup of a page, or you add a table, or you do a program, then you see what happens downstream. I think that it's important for every publisher to understand its visibility within LLMs. You can use Profound. There are other many other products that can help you with that. But then I think you also have to understand things like, when you write about a brand new topic that's adjacent to topics that you have, can you be cited? How quickly can you be cited? If you feel really strongly about a particular product and you write about it, will you get citations? Then the question is, so that's sort of answering, like, are
Hmm.
you authoritative on the topic? And then the second part of the question is, the publisher, how are you compensated for that?
Hmm.
And so I think every publisher is kind of asking the same question. Like, one, is there an opportunity for me to get paid by LLMs for that? After all, they're going to be making money, subscription fees and everything else, on the backs of the things that I wrote. Is that an option right now? We're not seeing an option for ourselves to generate significant revenue that way. And then the question is, what program do you offer a brand? Should the brand, um, be compensating you for editorial coverage, given
Hmm.
that the editorial coverage still needs to be independent? So, like, those are sort of the things I think that every publisher needs to think about. But I'd say number one, make sure your publication is valuable enough that it's cited, because otherwise I don't think you have much of a business.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, let's hope that results in a rescue plan for a lot of these publishers, right? If I was
Yeah.
certainly in the sales team, for branded content at the publishers or any kind of situation where we're getting paid for anything other than a banner or whatever. They should be positioning themselves as a not just for this sort of trusted editorial that is advertorial, right? Because that for the time being still has an influence on the LLMs.
Yeah, yeah, and there's advertorial, I guess that's part of it. But I think there's also like true editorial. You know,
Yeah,
like it's not good for anybody if there's a review where everything's 100% positive. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the consumer. It's not
yeah,
good for your LTV. It's not good for anything.
yeah.
So, but there's another thing that I want to bring up, and that's leaning into social. And so, I'm getting more B2B type ads on my social feeds than I ever have before. And I also think the social algorithms are a lot smarter at showing me things that I'm interested in. And so it feels like social is moving down funnel and lower funnel, helping people make decisions. And so I would say as a B2B brand, if you don't have a social strategy, if you're entirely hoping that people are researching for you and finding you in LLMs, I think you're really leaving something on the table. And I think that looking at the behavior of my own children, they're using social networks as a search engine as how they get all their news.
Yeah, 100%. I can't agree more on that. It's amazing that, we'll have did it clients come and say, well, we want to, uh, move budget into LinkedIn. And I'm like, well, let's have each social platform earn its way into your budget based on what they can deliver. And often the scale that Meta can deliver when you layer on custom audiences plus third-party data on audiences, then maybe lookalikes. It's amazing that you can sometimes have three times the scale in a Meta campaign than you can from a LinkedIn campaign and at a better ROI, right?
It,
Because
no,
LinkedIn
no,
can
no
often be
doubt,
more
and it's
expensive.
it's Meta, it's TikTok, it's others too, and a custom audience can help, no doubt. But even if you're like doing a B2B marketing to restaurant owners, the Meta algorithm is going to figure that out very
Of
quickly.
course.
You don't necessarily have to know,
Yeah.
target the restaurants and target people who follow chefs and stuff. Meta figures that out really, really quickly.
For sure. One other thing I feel like some publishers and brands are underinvesting in is really the various channels of push marketing, right? I
Mm,
mean, every year is the year that they say email is dead, but
right.
yet it's one of the most reliable forms of push marketing out to subscribers. And then you've got SMS, which requires a different level of permission and a different strategy around it. And then you've got browser push notifications. Maybe there's an app that you can do push
Mhm.
notifications in. So, where should they put that into their overall marketing plan? Should it, being a publisher or being a brand?
Well, I don't have a really point of view on browser push and app notifications. We might be in our sites missing, dropping the ball on those. But I can say with email and SMS, you should have it everywhere. So uh, consumers, and this is a B2C example, but consumers buy hundreds of thousands of dollars of products through our emails every single day. And and it's an extremely effective channel. And the key, just knowing the types of content people want and sending it to them. And then SMS, I think, is an amazing win back strategy or closing strategy. I don't know what you want to call it for B2B, where you've signaled intent, and then SMS is just making sure that you're getting them over the finish line.
Right.
So if the good news, if you're listening to this and you don't have those, you have so much upside with email and SMS.
Yeah, for sure. You'll just have to take some time to build your lists. But I do think there should be an imperative for every marketer, publisher, or otherwise to build those lists and build those permission relationships. Oddly enough, as a byproduct of cookie apocalypse, which never really happened on the Chrome side, but was true in Safari and Firefox. Having PII data as a publisher improves your yield for many of the monetization channels
Yeah,
that
sure does.
publishers want. So they went ahead and built out big audience development pushes to build those lists, and then realized like, oh wow, this is really great. It actually improves our yield. I've heard numbers from 25 to 35% yield improvements when PII is anonymized into the ad call from my publisher friends. So for sure, like there's a lot of value to having those permission relationships as a marketer. Um, what else should marketers be thinking about this year other than AI, as it relates to maybe some fundamentals that they're missing or other initiatives they should be doubling down on?
Well, I think there's I know you said besides AI, but just AI within your marketing organization super important. But one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot is like what could be called dark social. So like private Slack channels, private communities, private threads. I think this is sort of you know a reaction to the economy that we built as publishers and SEO practitioners and everything. Is how are people making decisions about your product outside of traditional channels? And I think that's something that I'd encourage every every marketer to think about. It is, where are people potentially talking about you that you're not that you don't see, or you're not active in. And um and you know like, people, how do people find out about Centerfield? Or they're often recommended. Probably the same thing with your organization. Despite having a great brand name, probably a lot of referrals. And so, I think that can be kind of a blind spot for marketers. What's your organic strategy, and what's your paid media ROI, et cetera. So that's an area that I'd be thinking about a lot.
Yeah, actually, I love that idea about the dark social, non-crawlable, non-public communities as often probably being those catalysts. Because I've certainly gotten referrals from some of these private communities, and they'll even tell me, "Oh yeah, I heard about you, and it's this CMO group or it's this other group," and they were having a conversation. An ex-client of mine might have said, "Oh yeah, definitely call Kevin and the team that did it." And so in addition to that direct referral, I'm sure that it also occasionally has a byproduct of content, mentions and or citations making their way into the public domain, right?
Probably.
And so therefore, oddly enough, participation in those dark social channels may somehow bubble up into search friendly and or PR friendly and or GEO friendly content, right? That happens. It may not be a primary, but it's just sort of fun to think about it from the perspective of, yes, it facilitates referrals, and these private dark social groups are a good place to sort of hang out and participate in and activate in. So yeah, I think that's actually really great advice, and I don't hear that very often from anybody. So thanks,
Thanks.
thanks for sharing that.
You got
Uh,
it.
yeah, you're lots of great stuff here. I appreciate you jumping on and sharing your wisdom with myself and with the listeners, and hope to have you back soon.
Thanks, Kevin. Honored to be on the program, and appreciate the conversation today.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.